Okay. So last week, so today is the session number 5 of the first semester on graded fusion category. So last week we did not finish a proof. So let me at least state the corollary. So there is a one-to-one correspondence between equivalence classes of faithful grading of C and fusion subcategory D in C containing the adjunct subcategory such that so the group G index D is a normal subgroup of the universal grading group. So to understand that, we have to come back to what is GD. So GD is defined here. Okay. So specifically, so to each D, so to each D containing that, you associate the universal grading of D that is trivial on of C, which is trivial on D. So we mentioned that before. There is a universal grading for C, but there is also a universal grading for which D is trivial. So we mentioned that. And for each grading, faithful grading, we associate the trivial component, so the C0, the component of the neutral element, neutral component. Okay, so last week we proved an intermediate correspondence. So we want to show a one-to-one correspondence. And as I explained last week, we want to show this kind of correspondence, but we prove this correspondence and this correspondence. Okay? So what is the correspondence we prove? So I will not go into the details because we already proved, I already explained that, but we prove. So there is a one-to-one correspondence between normal subgroup of the universal grading group and equivalence classes of faithful grading of C. Okay? So we proved that in details last time. So now we have to show, we have to explain so we prove this correspondence, we have to explain this correspondence, and that we will deduce what we want. Okay. But the second correspondence will be almost immediate. Okay. So the result, my hand are freezed, I cannot write.
So should I read one more?
Huh?
One more.
Oh, yeah.
You can sometimes hold it.
Yeah. The result follow from, so the second one-to-one correspondence we discuss follow from corollary 2.5. So I will explain in more details. Providing it's very hot. Yeah. Let me come back to 2.5 for a minute. Yeah. Sorry. There is a one. So 2.5 already provide a one-to-one correspondence, and it will really be the one-to-one correspondence we need. So look a bit of this. There is a one-to-one correspondence between the fusion subcategory containing CAD and the subgroup of the subgroup. Okay. So thank you for, and yeah, you can go. Just okay. So we have this corollary. So more specifically, we provide one-to-one correspondence between normal subgroup. Normal subgroups of the universal grading group and fusion subcategory D in C containing C had such that the corresponding group is a normal subgroup of the, so it's immediate, you see. So this was the intermediate step, the second as intermediate step. Between the correspondence already proved before in the proof, correspondence already proved and the expected one. So okay. This let me just draw the picture, but this picture may be confusing if you just read the slide without audio. So maybe I will delay that. We want to prove this correspondence. We prove this correspondence and this correspondence. Okay. So it's okay. I will delay that because it may be confusing. Okay. So remark 2.7. Okay. So the remark 2.7 is just saying that so this paper, this course is focused on the braided case, but remember that braided means that the Grothendieck ring, braided implies the Grothendieck ring is abelian, because the braiding is the categorification of the commutation. So in particular, the Grothendieck ring is abelian. Of course, it's commutative. It's not sufficient. You can have a commutative Grothendieck ring for which the category has no braiding. So to be commutative Grothendieck ring is not sufficient, but at least it's necessary. So if it is if the Grothendieck ring is abelian, in particular, the universal grading group should be abelian. So in the braided case, the universal grading group is abelian. So all the assumption, all the regarding normality, for example, you have normality here, or many where else, is useless in the braided case. So you can forget about normality because in an abelian finite group, in abelian group, every subgroup is normal. So if C is braided, then UC is abelian. Consequently, in this case, the normality as condition holds automatically. The normality condition in corollary to 6 hold automatically. Kali. Okay. Next. A new subsection regarding dimensions. Subsection 2.4 dimensions. Okay. So we will discuss Grothendieck ring and Frobenius-Perron dimension. In fact, yeah. So in the fusion category, you have two canonical dimensions, the categorical dimension and the Frobenius-Perron dimension. And they are the same if the category is pseudo-unitary. So in general, they are not the same. So let C be a fusion category. So the tensor product in C induce a ring structure on the Grothendieck group. So you get a Grothendieck ring. So, okay. The induce ring structure or induce the ring structure because otherwise there's no other ring structure. Induce the ring structure the Grothendieck ring denoted K0C or KC. I don't know if K0 is just for the group structure, but let's call K0 C for the ring. So there are two notions of dimension. So the Frobenius-Perron dimension and the categorical dimension. They are two distinct in general, but not for pseudo-unitary, but related notion of dimension. In C, one taking value in R and the other in the field, under which the fusion category is defined, over which, yeah. So the first one is a Frobenius-Perron dimension. Frobenius-Perron dimension. So we will briefly recall that. We'll not go into the details of the Frobenius-Perron theorem, which is explained in details in the EGNO book. The Frobenius-Perron dimension is a linear character. More precisely, it's a ring homomorphism from the Grothendieck ring to C, or to R, in fact, because it mapped to R, in fact, to R plus. R plus is not a ring. So to R, the Frobenius-Perron dimension is a ring homomorphism. So Frobenius-Perron dimension from the Grothendieck ring. In general, for any fusion ring, you have from span dimension. You don't need to be a Grothendieck ring. Such that the Frobenius parent dimension of X is greater than or equal to 0 for all X in C. And it is unique. There is a unique such homomorphism. So you can see the ENO Annals section 8. It's also in EGNO book, of course. According to ENO 5, section 8, there exists a unique such homomorphism, and it is the value on each non-zero object is greater than or equal to 1. And in fact, the Frobenius parent dimension of X is greater than or equal to 1 for all non-zero X in C. And the value is an algebraic integer. In fact, more precisely, is a cyclotomic integer. Moreover, the value of Frobenius parent dimension of X for all X in C are algebraic integers in a certain cyclotomic field. So, cyclotomic integer. Certain cyclotomic field. And for that, see the Annals paper of Ettinghoff, Nitsche, Shostrick. So should I write 2005? Corollary 853 and 855. Okay. Okay. So now, the Frobenius parent dimension of the fusion category is just the sum of the square of the Frobenius parent dimension of the simple object up to isomorphism. So the Frobenius parent dimension of a fusion category C is defined as the sum of the square of the Frobenius parent dimension of the simple object up to isomorphism. F team of X square. So the Frobenius parent dimension is of an object is positive. So yeah, it's positive as we wrote before. So the Frobenius parent dimension of the category is also positive. This is a positive cyclotomic algebraic integer in R. Cyclotomic algebraic integer in the real field. Hmm. And you can say more by Victor Ostrich regarding the action of the Galois group. Furthermore, more according to Ostrich 2009, the ideal generated by the Frobenius per dimension of C, generated by Frobenius per dimension of C. So the ideal of that in the ring of algebraic integer, this ideal is stable by the action of the Galois group. In the ring of algebraic integers is stable under the action of the Galois group. Okay. So we have a nice arithmetic structure here. Okay, so example. So the next example, so it's just regarding semi-simple finite dimensional of algebra. In fact, we just state that the Frobenius per dimension for the representation category of such of algebra is just the dimension of the representation. So it's this is just what we will say in this remark, in this example. So let H be a finite dimensional semi-simple of algebra over some field K, and we consider the fusion category of representation of H. And consider the fusion category C representation of H, the category of finite dimensional representations of H. So the standard, the usual dimension, so field over the field, which is also an homomorphism. Homomorphism. So the dimension of the field under the field. So it's a ring homomorphism like that. Is integer. So this already satisfies the positivity. So by the uniqueness of the Frobenius per dimension, it should be the Frobenius per dimension. Satisfy the positivity for all non-zero x in C. It follows that the Frobenius per dimension of x equal the dimension of x under the field K for all x in C by uniqueness of the Frobenius power dimension. As we said before, the Frobenius power dimension is uniquely determined by this such a positivity. Okay. And it follows directly that the Frobenius power dimension of rep H, of the fusion category rep H, is nothing but the dimension of algebra for the field K. Okay. So next. So this subsection was Frobenius power dimension. Next, it will be about trace, squared norm, and global dimension. So we will finish by the second dimension we mentioned. So you have the Frobenius power dimension and the categorical dimension. Here, it is also called global dimension, squared norm, and global dimension. Okay, so we consider the fusion category C, and we consider a natural isomorphism between the identity functor and the double dual functor. And this natural isomorphism is not necessarily tensor. And we will use this isomorphism to define a trace using the evaluation and the co-evaluation map. There will be two kinds of trace, the left trace and the right trace. And in fact, this trace will depend on the choice of the isomorphism, but we can combine these two traces to define a square norm for the object, which turns out to be independent of the choice of the isomorphism. So this will be the point of this section. So let's see, be a fusion category, and let phi be any natural, but not necessarily tensor, isomorphism between the identity functor and the double dual functor. Between the identity functor and the double dual functor, so the functor taking the second dual. So you can denote phi as follows. So identity functor to the double dual functor. So such an isomorphism exists. So this always exists for fusion category, and it is uniquely determined by what happened in the simple case for simple object. Such an isomorphism exists in every fusion category and is uniquely determined by the simple object. Is uniquely determined by a collection of isomorphism phi x from x to x double star for x in x simple. So for the existence of this isomorphism phi x, you can refer to EGNO 15 proposition 481 for existence of such phi x. And as an exercise, you can check that the data of such collection is necessary and sufficient to define natural isomorphism. Check natural isomorphism commuting diagram. So a notion of natural isomorphism is defined by some commuting diagram. As an exercise, you can check that the data of this collection is enough to get a natural isomorphism. So remember, the natural isomorphism is a collection for all the objects, not just the simple object, and it should satisfy some commuting diagram. So it's an exercise. So we are okay. We have the existence of this phi for all fusion categories. So now we want to define left and right trace using the evaluation and co-evaluation map. So for any object X of the fusion category, let so I already mentioned evaluation and co-evaluation map before. If I'm not mistaken, maybe introduction somewhere. No. I mentioned that before. Otherwise, it's well known. Or maybe I. Check. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, I wrote something on the slide, but it's not written on my notes. Anyway. So so it's a evaluation and co-evaluation map is a way to define the dual, the rigid structure. So you have the dual. So if you have an object X, the dual object is defined by the data of two morphisms. The evaluation map from X star to X. So the dual is an object X star together with two morphisms, evaluation X and co-ev X, like that, satisfying the zigzag relation. Yeah. So this is denoted like that. Pictorially, you have from x star to x, and here for x star tensor x to 1, and 1 is denoted. In fact, 1 is not written pictorially, but just to mention that, you can put some dots like that, but usually you don't write it. And from x, from 1 to x tensor x star. So this is picture for fx, and this is a picture for co-fx. And this picture, so maybe I write that before, but I forgot, satisfies the zigzag relation. Zigzag, so this is really well known. So if you don't write the 1, you don't write the dot, so you have something like that, equal like that. Okay. So here you have coev, ev, and you put some identities in between. Identity, f, coev. Okay. The zigzag relation. So this is the definition of a dual object of x. So you have x, the dual is another object denoted as x star together with two morphisms satisfying this zigzag relation. This is the definition. Okay. But maybe I mentioned that before, I forgot. So these are denoted the evaluation coevaluation map. So evaluation and co-evaluation maps. Okay, now the trace. So the trace of a morphism from x to x. So given the morphism f from x to itself, we define two traces depending on the choice of the isomorphism, the natural isomorphism here. Do you see the problem is you have a map from x to x, and you have a map like that from x to x, and usually you want to define the trace as closing the loop like that. But the problem is that when you apply evaluation coevaluation map, you will have to deal with x double star. That's why we need this kind of isomorphism to handle that. So given a morphism f, we define two traces depending on this isomorphism. So first trace, so this is line denoting that. So we write 2 because we have another equation 1 before, but this is the first. The left or the right, this one is the right. You draw on the right. So trace plus of f is, so you start from the unit object. You apply co-evaluation of x. So this, I will write a picture after that, but this is for people who don't like picture. If you are in a category for which the pictorial calculus is not well defined, you can just write like that. So from 1 to x tensor x star, so the co-evaluation map, and then you apply on x, you apply the isomorphism, and on wait. identity. I made a mistake in my note. So you have X star. So identity. Yeah. Okay. So you apply the identity on X star, and on X, you apply, you first apply the morphism F, and then you apply the isomorphism. And you go to X double star tensor X star. Okay, and then you apply evaluation map from X star, you got 1. So what is the picture? Here. So you start from 1. The dots. So it should be really dots, otherwise it's. So dots. And then co-evaluation map. X star. Then identity here. And F here, followed by the isomorphism. So you are still in X here, and then it's X double star. And then evaluation map of X star, and again the unit. So it's a map from 1 to 1, but 1 is a unit, is a simple linear simple. So this is just a scalar. It's an element in the field. Okay. And so here you draw a picture on the right. So maybe we should call that the right trace. But then you have the left trace denoted trace minus of F. Wait, we will. So it's similar, but we will see that after the pause. I don't know why there are less people on today than tomorrow. Usually there are more people attend on Friday than on Thursday.
Thursday.
I don't know why.
Everyone is tired.
Huh?
Many people might be tired.
On Thursday? Why? Why on Friday?
Fridays, tomorrow is a holiday, so.
Oh, okay. So the left trace. So you start from 1. You apply the co-evaluation. So it's similar. So I will not go into the. I will not say the details. I just write. It's similar, but you draw on the other side. ID X star tensor F. And here you need to compose with the inverse of the isomorphism. If you really want to get something, and here, then evaluation X to 1. So the picture is similar, but you have to compose, you are on the other side. So 1, then this, X star, X double star, and then identity. Here the inverse to go to X, and then you can apply F. You are still in X, and you close like that. So this is still an element, a scalar. So okay. So you have 2 traces with these 2 pictorial representation. So from these 2 traces, you can define 2 dimensions for an object, computing the 2 traces for the identity morphism on this object. And these dimensions are not intrinsic, intrinsic. But when you multiply these two dimensions, the choice of phi delayed, and so they're intrinsic. So define d plus x to be the right trace of the identity morphism for x, and d minus x to be the identity, like that. So it is known that so we know that this is always non-zero for all simple object x. For that, you can see EGNO book. See why. So this is explicitly stated in EGNO book. Proposition 484. So as I said, these values are non-canonical. The value d plus minus of x are non-canonical. Canonical. Since they depend on the choice of the isomorphism, natural isomorphism. Since they depend on the choice of phi. However, for any x in, for any simple object, the product of the two is canonical. We have the canonical quantity square norm. So this square norm is a notation. Be careful. This is a notation. So what do I mean by notation? It means that this is defined directly. This is not defined first. Of course, when you have a square norm, and if this square norm is positive, you can take the positive square root, and you will get something like that. But here, this is defined by for itself first, and then you can get that. But a priori, yeah, without what I will write here, this does not make sense. So it's a little abuse of notation, but so d plus of x times d minus of x. And this will be equation 4. Okay. So this is called, this is known as Muger's square norm, because it was introduced by Muger in 2003, and it was denoted the square norm in the Annals paper by Ettinghoff, Nitsche, Shostrik in section 2. So which is known as Muger's square norm of x. Muger's square norm of x introduced by Muger So Muger 2003 and name square norm in so Annals paper by Tinkoff Nishi Shostrik 2005 in section 2. Okay. So this is independent of the choice of the natural isomorphism. What is it? Sélectionnez l'action double touch. Choisissez le fonctionnement du geste double. Touchez votre. Ce réglage peut être modifié. Yeah, I don't understand that. This is to get the eraser, but I don't know how it works. Okay, so this is independent of the choice of the natural isomorphism. The squared norm is independent of the choice of the natural isomorphism. And in fact, the proof is straightforward. But let me leave it as an exercise with the following hint. So trace plus minus involve phi x or its inverse. So phi x is an element, can be seen as is an element of a non-zero element in the field, because x is a simple object. So by the homomorphism from x to itself by Shor lemma, it's just the field, and because it's an isomorphism, it's a non-zero field. So you can take the inverse, and so trace plus depend on one number, trace minus depend on the inverse of this number. And so when you make the product of the two, and in fact, these two choice of number cancel, and so it's okay. If x simple, so you have some simplifications, etc. So that's why it's independent of the choice. Okay, so now, we will define a variation of the left and right trace. So we define the left and right trace for a morphism from x to x. But if you define a morphism from x tensor x, from x tensor y to x tensor y, you can define a variation of the left and right trace in the sense that you only consider, so it's a morphism from x tensor y to x tensor y. If you consider the x part of x tensor y, you make the trace only on the x part, or only on the right part. You have, I will explain and draw a picture. You have this kind of variation. And if you consider the left part for x and the right part for y, you have a trace, variation. I don't know, with two. So let me explain. So for any morphism f from x tensor y to x tensor y, we can define, so this variation of trace, which is denoted by what may be a little abuse of notation. I don't know if it really makes sense. So the variation is like that. So you don't care about x, you only make the trace for y. F And let me write, just to get the intuition of what we are talking about, let me write the picture first, and the non-pictorial definition after that. So you don't care about x, and you apply the right trace for the y component like that. Y star. And I forgot to write so you need the isomorphism. And here the right trace only for the y component. And for the left component, you put identity. So it's a variation. It's a variation because the previous trace defined before, it will be, you put everything, and with the good natural isomorphism. And here you only care about the one part. Okay? That can be written non-pictorially as follow. So here you have one, but here you have x. So in fact, you start from x, because x tensor 1 is x, sorry. X tensor 1 is x, so you start from x, and you omit to write tensor 1, and so identity of x, and then for the omitted one, you apply the co-evaluation of y. Okay? So you omit tensor 1. As it is usual, you can omit. So please go from x tensor y star. And then, in fact, the ID is the same as before. You just, as long as you. So here, again, okay, so let me write. So it's a composition. Okay. My notes are not very clear. Identity of x. Okay. And then tensor. Okay, you have here. Okay. Okay, so this here, you have identity of x, the isomorphism phi y, and identity of y star. So you have that. Identity of x tensor phi y tensor identity of y star composed with f tensor identity of y star. Okay, which correspond to, so this corresponds to that, and this corresponds to that. Okay. Then, so we have that. So we did that, and we finish by some evaluation of identities. So it is as before. So here you have x tensor y double star tensor y star, and then identity of x tensor evaluation of y star, sorry, y star x. Okay, and you have the same for the left part, and then the left part will involve x instead of y. So you have again this kind of abuse of notation. I don't know if this notation really makes sense. Right, it's a notation, but you can choose the notation you want. Maybe it makes sense. I'm not sure. Abuse of notations. Let me write with a question mark. Anyway. So here, so I omit to write the tensor one. So coev x star tensor identity of y, x star tensor x double star tensor y, and then so identity of x star tensor f composed with identity of x star tensor inverse of the isomorphism tensor identity y. You get to x star tensor x tensor y, and then you apply evaluation map of x tensor identity of y. And the picture will be, we close on the other side only for x. So you have the morphism, you have x and y, and here you apply the inverse. So, and then you close like that. And here you have identity. Okay. And now you make a mix. You make a mix of the two to get, because these two are not scalar. These two are morphism. The one is a morphism from x to x. The other is a morphism from y to y. They are not scalar. If x and y are not simple, they are not scalar. If they are simple, they can be defined as a scalar, but in general, if they are not simple, they are not scalar. So, so now if you combine the two, so note that so trace plus of trace minus tensor IDY of f equal trace minus of IDX tensor trace plus of f denoted trace minus tensor trace plus of f. So what this equality is saying, you start from that, you close here with a good isomorphism. It is the same thing as closing here with a good isomorphism. You get the same picture, and in fact the same scalar. So the picture is the following. So let me copy and paste this one. Put it here. Oh no, it will be, let me just write it like that. So it's small f. You have tac, 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 tac. Phi y. Oh, need a little bit more space. Here, it should be enough. And here, phi x inverse. Okay, and now you can close. Okay. Okay, so you have that. So we will not use this notation immediately in the section, but it will be used later. But at least it's funny. This is interesting. Anyway, so now, what about now? Okay. So we will denote like that for the cyclotomic, the field of cyclotomic number. So be the maximal cyclotomic extension. Cyclotomic extension of the field of rational in K. So remember, here, let me see like that. So Q is a subfield of K because K is of characteristic 0. Since it is assumed of characteristic 0, and the maximal extension of Q is also contained in K because K is algebraically closed, plus algebraically closed. So it makes sense to consider the maximal cyclotomic extension. So what does it mean, maximal cyclotomic extension? It means the subfield generated by all the root of unity. The subfield generated by all roots of unity. Okay. So now they define the complex conjugation. So I'm not completely sure why they need to define in some abstract way. Maybe I am missing something, but the problem is that you may have several ways to realize a field extension explicitly in the complex field. So there are maybe some choices are made, I don't know. But so the complex conjugation is defined as the automorphism of the field of this field, which send each defined in such a way by sending each root of unity to its inverse. So it's a strange way to redefine the usual complex conjugation x plus iy mapped to x minus iy. But okay, maybe it's more in the philosophy of Galois theory. And maybe it will be useful. I'm not sure. So the automorphism of K-seq that send each root of unity to its inverse is called complex conjugation. Conjugation. And denoted. Like that. So let me write my comment for k equals c, x plus iy is x minus iy, as usual. Yeah. So now we're interested in the real cyclotomic number. So define k psych to be the number here which are invariant by complex conjugation. So in C, it is just the real cyclotomic numbers, algebraic numbers. Okay. So this is denoted the maximal totally real subfield of K-sig, which is the maximal totally real subfield of K-sig. Okay. So again, by a result in Annals paper by Eitinghoff, Nitsche, Shostrik, we know that the square norm is a totally positive algebraic integer here. So it's a result. When I said you have to be careful with this notation, so it's a result to prove that this is a positive number. So here is defined like that. And the notation can be confusing because you can say, okay, maybe if you use this notation, you can say, okay, it's positive by definition. No, it's not positive by definition. This requires a proof. And it is positive, so the notation makes sense. But you need a proof. So the notation makes sense a posteriori, but not a priori. Okay, so in Annals paper, Eitinghoff, Nitsche, Shostrik, it follows from Eitinghoff, Nitsche, Shostrik, Annals paper, remark 3.1 corollary 853. Its squared norm x squared like that is totally positive. So it's not just positive, but totally positive. And what's the meaning of totally positive? it means that it is positive and all the Galois conjugates are positive. So maybe this definition of complex conjugate makes sense too, because it may correspond to, say, totally real, because maybe the number here are real and all the Galois conjugates are real. Maybe. At least it's written totally real, so it should be something like that. Okay, so totally positive is a totally positive. Algebraic integer. Algebraic integer in this field. And totally positive here mean at least in C, all its conjugate are real positive. Okay, then furthermore, according. So what next? So in the braided case, so again, a statement regarding the ideal generated by the square norm of any simple object in the ring of algebraic integer is stable under the action of the Galois group. Again by Ostrich 2009. According to Ostrich 2009, if C is braided, and it is explicitly specified that this is not true without this assumption, you have this Galois invariance. So the ideal generated by the square norm of any simple object X in the ring of algebraic integer, in the ring of algebraic integer is stable under the action of the Galois group. Is stable under the action of the Galois group of gal Q like that. So what time is it? It remains 7-8 minutes. So now we define the square norm, which is independent of the choice of the isomorphism. So if you take the sum of the square norm of the simple object up to isomorphism, you get what is called the categorical dimension or global dimension, which is also independent. So we have a kind of canonical dimension. Together with the Frobenius Parity dimension, you have another canonical thing. So the categorical dimension, also known as global dimension, categorical dimension, global dimension of a fusion category C is defined as a sum of the square norm. As the sum of square norms of its simple object up to isomorphism. Dim C is the sum for x in that of that. This is equation 5. And remember that this is defined as d plus x times d minus x. D plus or d minus taken independently depend on the isomorphism phi, actual isomorphism phi, but the product do not depend on, as we explained. And so the dimension of C is canonical. And it satisfies some arithmetical property. So it's also a totally positive algebraic integer cyclotomic. So the categorical dimension is a totally positive algebraic integer in K are sick and is independent of the choice of the natural isomorphism. Independent of the choice of the natural isomorphism. And again, something regarding the ideal and Galois invariance with Ostrich. Moreover, according to Ostrich 2009, the ideal generated by dim C, in the ring of algebraic integer is stable under the action of the Galois group. Stable under the action of Gal Q. Okay. So now, this subsection was called trace, square norm, and global dimension. Now we will talk about pivotal structure and categorical dimension. So the pivotal structure will be the natural isomorphism with a tensor structure. So pivotal structure and categorical dimensions. Okay. So I meant 2 minutes. So just time to recall what is pivotal structure. So by definition, a pivotal structure is on a fusion category. C is a tensor isomorphism. Is a natural tensor. What? Is a natural tensor isomorphism between the identity functor and the double dual functor. So the difference between what we said before is tensor. So is a tensor natural isomorphism. So they omit the word natural in the paper. So I guess it means natural isomorphism phi from the identity functor to the double dual functor. And for the last minute, let me just recall. So natural mean phi y compose f equal f double star compose phi x for all morphism f between two objects, x and y. And tensor mean phi x tensor y equal phi x tensor phi y. Okay. Okay, so that's all for today. So yeah, that's all for today. Tomorrow we will continue this, discuss pivotal structure and then spherical structure. Okay, see you tomorrow.